In a Trump-Vance administration, would you keep the troops we have in the Middle East, or would you pull them out as President Trump tried to do in his first administration?
Well, obviously, we have a lot of troops in a lot of different parts of the Middle East. I think it's reasonable to support Israel as it deals with this extremely unprovoked attack from Iran. And let's step back a little bit here, because the reason that Iran has all of these weapons to fire at Israel is because they have a lot of money. And where do they get that money from? From the easing of oil sanctions and from the release of a lot of money that the Biden-Harris administration had effectively locked up. They released it. And the promise of releasing it is that somehow it would make the Iranians a better partner, would maybe get them a little bit more on the trajectory to being a reasonable country. That's not happening. They're just using that money to buy weapons that they launch against American. They're tightening them up. They're going in the other direction after making a big mistake. And that big mistake was to empower Iran financially to afford a lot of weapons that they're not firing, not just at the Israelis, but also at us. And they're also arming the Houthis, and that's obviously affecting global trade. So I think the first and biggest mistake, the thing that we need to change, is we need to stop giving the Iranians money that they use to make ourselves and our allies weaker in the region. But when it comes to Israel specifically, look, I don't think that we should be taking assets out of the Middle East at a time when our most important ally in the region is coming under significant attack. I don't think that would send the right message. And most importantly, it's not just Israel, it's us. We have interests that are important in the Middle East. We obviously have to deal with the Houthis somehow because we want to reopen the lines of global trade. Very hard to do that if we do a full-scale withdrawal. But if there's certain countries where maybe we shouldn't have troops, I'm willing to have that conversation. But, you know, you're talking about 14 different theaters, 14 different troop deployments. It's hard to make a broad stroke conclusion about the whole thing.
Russia is behind a fake video that is circulating of someone tearing up ballots in Pennsylvania. Are you implying here some kind of conspiracy? What price should Moscow pay for trying to manipulate American voters?
Well, look, I think a lot of countries are going to try to manipulate our voters. They're going to try to manipulate our elections. That's what they do. I think the bigger question is what is in our best interest vis-a-vis Russia, not what price Russia should pay for putting out social media videos. Social media posts and social media videos, Margaret, do you want us to go to war because the Russians made a ridiculous video? Question, Margaret, because
manipulating voters is part of our democracy.
Everything that we've tried, a lot of the sanctions that we've tried, they've gone off like a wet firecracker. We promised at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war that we would engage in financial nuclear war against the Russians. Biden administration, Harris administration officials talked about how our sanctions would cripple their economy. They didn't. And so we have to be realistic about what America can accomplish, compare it against our national interests, and just be smart about this. I don't think that we should overreact to anything. What we should do is encourage our fellow Americans to be careful. Don't trust everything that you see on social media. And of course, we should push back where appropriate. But that's the big question, is what is an appropriate response to a country making social media videos? I'm not going to make a commitment to that sitting right here.
Do you have full confidence that the state of Pennsylvania and the election officials here are administering this election fairly?
Whether it's voter ID in places like Wisconsin or Georgia, or a little bit of tightening of the regulations around signature verification in places like Pennsylvania, that I think our elections are in a pretty good spot in 2024. Obviously, if something comes up, we don't know what the future is going to hold. If we see evidence, for example, of an illegal alien casting a ballot, yeah, we're going to challenge that in court. But seeing what I see right now, 10 days out from the election, Margaret, I think Pennsylvania is in a really good spot. I think we're going to win the state, and I think Pennsylvanians, Republicans, Democrats, Independents should have confidence in the elections here. I think it's a more interesting reflection of Kamala Harris's campaign that at this late stage, she's not talking about how she can lower the price of groceries because she raised the price of groceries. She's not talking about how she can lower the price of housing because her policy saw a 40% increase in the cost of housing. She's going to Michigan with Liz Cheney, the person whose father is responsible for the deaths of millions of innocent Arabs and tens of thousands of innocent American troops, and saying effectively that if you elect me, I'm going to have the foreign policy of Dick and Liz Cheney. I don't think that message is going to fly in Michigan. I don't think it flies in Pennsylvania either. I think that Donald Trump is the person who's going to lower the cost of groceries. I know that Donald Trump is the person who's going to secure the southern border. Donald Trump has a plan to open up American energy, to lower the cost of goods, and to make our neighborhoods and communities safer. I know a lot of women care a lot about the safety of their communities. What does it say about Kamala Harris's leadership that violent crime has gone up? What does it say about the fact that fentanyl overdose deaths have increased under her leadership? I think that we can make a good case to women, but I'm not going to tell them who they have to vote for. I'm going to try to persuade them. The voters are ultimately going to decide. My first loyalty is to the American people and to the United States Constitution. I think the best way to serve loyally to those people and to that Constitution is to get us back in a place where Americans can afford to live a decent life again. That's why we're running the campaign focus on the affordability of goods, American manufacturing. It's a big deal here in Erie, Pennsylvania, and certainly on securing that southern border. I think the threats to our Constitution, Morgan, I do think they're real. The threats to our Constitution come from Kamala Harris, who's saying that she wants to censor Americans instead of persuade them. Whether you agree with me or Donald Trump or disagree with us, we believe in the First Amendment. We're going to fight for your right to speak your mind and think whatever you want in the United States of America.
We are out of time, but just to put a fine point on it, do you believe Vice President Harris, who will preside over the election certification in January, that she has the power to ask for alternate electors?
What I think Vice President Harris has the power to do is to enforce the Constitution. I'll leave it to her what she thinks that she has to do. But Donald Trump and I are going to win this election. He's going to be the president again, and he's going to fix what Kamala Harris has broken. And thank God for that, because I just want Americans to live a better life.